Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Citizens Research Council's first experiment in giving a online press conference. We welcome any feedback. As I say, this is our first time, so anything you've experienced elsewhere that would be a handy tip for us to do, we'd greatly appreciate it. But we want to try to make our research as digestible as possible, and working with you, the media, is definitely in our best interest. So we want to give this a try. Um, Bob, if you can put up the slide deck and go to the first slide. I know many of you know about the Citizens Research Council, but just real quick, we are now a 108-year-old organization. Its mission today is the same as the mission was then, to provide nonpartisan, independent information about public policy issues in state and local government in Michigan, and present them, provide analysis of them, so that policymakers, when we say policymakers, we cast a very wide net. Obviously, our legislature and governor and city councils and county commissions, but ultimately the people are the ones that elect those officials and vote on initiatives and referendums. So we count the people as policymakers. So they can understand the issues and cast their own policy lens on that. But we think it's very important, and facts matter, and we want to be able to present that information. We are going to go through this. We set aside 45 minutes. We can go longer, we can go shorter. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to give this little introduction and turn it over to Bob Snyder, who's going to do a quick rundown of research, try to give you an essence for what's in the report. Put a link to the report in the chat. It's live now on our website. Following his presentation, of course, we'll have an opportunity for any questions you want to ask. And we just ask that you use the Zoom feature to raise your hand, and we'll call on you one at a time. We want to be here for you. So anything we can do, let us know. Before I turn it over, a quick word about how this report came about. Last year, about this time, I was invited to an event, talk about innovation and entrepreneurship, and this was all new to me. I found it a very useful learning experience, but coming out of it, some people from the William Davidson Foundation pulled me aside and said, there's a real need for research to understand how funding in Michigan compares to some of our competitor states, and if it's below the other states as they suspected, what can be done about that? So we're very thankful for the William Davidson Foundation for providing a grant for us to do this research. And as you'll see going forward, we are working with the foundation to roll out the report and get it into the eyes of the people playing in this field and able to do the things we hope get done. So with that, Bob, why don't you take it away and spend about 10, 12 minutes, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions.
I Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute myself because I got the little I got the little screen with just a few of you in it. The mute button wasn't as clear as it was a minute ago. So good morning, everyone. I appreciate all of you attending today. Hope this report is of interest to all of you as journalists. And what I'm going to do, as Eric said, is try to give you a very quick run through the report to give you a flavor for it. And certainly I'm available today, tomorrow, and in the future to talk about the nitty-gritty and the details to the extent that you have questions, and we can certainly spend time today addressing those as well. So just real quick, this report talks about why should we even care about economic innovation? Why is it important? One. Two, what are states doing to promote economic innovation in their economies? And three, what revenue options are available to Michigan if they want to invest more in innovation and entrepreneurship programs, which we'll refer to as I&E programs for short. What are options to do that? So I'm going to start with why should we care? Economists disagree about a lot, but they're clear on one thing. Economic growth, our long-term economic growth and living standards are tied to economic innovation. Technological progress, making new products that make workers more productive is the key to driving economic growth, productivity, and incomes and living standards for people. We talk about that in the report. Economists also generally agree that there are barriers to innovation. There are things happening in the free market that constrain innovation. And we talk in the report about knowledge spillovers. We talk into the report about evidence that young new startup firms bringing innovations to market face higher capital costs for certain reasons. So there's a market issue. There's a market problem that public policy could theoretically address. And then we end that first section of the report by providing evidence that there are many different public policy interventions that have shown to have a positive impact on helping to generate innovation, and that includes things that state innovation and entrepreneurship programs often employ: accelerators, incubators, publicly funded venture capital programs. So after establishing that economic basis, we looked at innovation in entrepreneurship programs in Michigan and in 5 case study states that are kind of neighboring competitors. What are I&E programs? What are we talking about? Access to capital support, so early stage financing for new high-tech startups. Business support programs, which are everything from technical support to product evaluation. Do we have a product that's good, that's a fit for the market? Publicly funded business accelerators and incubator programs. And then university commercialization, working with our university research and development efforts to try to commercialize products and business startups out of that community as well. So then we looked at how does Michigan compare, and what does it look like with the programs that we have now? We review Michigan's I&E programs, and we review data about where does Michigan stand as an innovative state. And two big takeaways from that. One, Michigan has a very strong capacity to produce innovation. We have an auto legacy that makes R&D an emphasis here in the state. We have world-class research universities that generate extensive R&D, and universities are often a real incubator of innovation. And we have a strong workforce. Michigan, our last report on Michigan's economic future showed we have a real strong concentration of engineers, in particular in Michigan. But the data also suggests Michigan doesn't get the bang for the buck, kind of relative to that R&D. An MEDC evaluation, state-sponsored one, found, per dollar of university R&D, we get fewer startups and fewer inventions than the average state. And while we're a leader in R&D, we're not a leader. We're below average in terms of attracting venture capital deals to the state relative to the size of our economy. We don't have a lot of as much success in that. So capacity to innovate, but for whatever reason, not quite getting the bang for the buck that other states are getting. We looked at I&E programs then in Michigan and these other states to compare spending effort. And spending effort we measured in the report as state funding to I&E programs as a percentage of or relative to the state economy. In particular, this metric is state spending per $1 million in state GDP. Wanted to make the spending effort and make it comparable to the size of the economy. My economy is twice as large, then I'm going to need more spending effort to generate innovation in it. And we found Michigan is relatively low compared to the 5 states. Ohio and Indiana have almost triple the spending effort in terms of spending per $1 million in state GDP as Michigan. Pennsylvania is roughly double. New York's ahead of us. Illinois was the only state that ranked behind. And a key driver that we talk about in the report of that is, in particular, those 3 top states have very long-standing and well-funded business support partners, entrepreneurial support services partners that Michigan has lacked in terms of the funding and in terms of kind of the duration of that partnership. Ohio, you'll see some numbers here. Ohio provides funding to its 5 regional partners at almost $33 million a year. Pennsylvania has Ben Franklin Technology Partners in different regions of the state that are funded at about 32 million. Indiana has one entity, Elevate Ventures, is a nonprofit public-private partnership at $6.5 million, but Indiana is like probably half the, the economy's half the size of Michigan. They have those partners are kind of key to coordinating across those 3 areas: business support, access to capital, working with the universities. Those states have better funded partnerships that kind of drive the innovation ecosystem in their states. So having looked at a comparison of where Michigan fits in terms of its public spending effort relative to some of those other states, we looked at provided a fiscal roadmap. If you wanted to generate more funding, how would you do that? In Michigan, what are our revenue options? Bonding is one, and we talk in the report about Ohio. They have a Third Frontier initiative. They kickstarted their I&E programming with $1.2 billion in bonding. We have precedents in Michigan with the Clean Michigan initiative and the tobacco settlement securitization that helped capitalize our 21st Century Jobs Fund, which is our main economic development fund in Michigan. Bonding is an option, and Ohio in particular was a state that really leveraged bonding to drive a lot of their public support. We learned about other models in other states. In Illinois, there's an Illinois Growth and Innovation Fund that state law allows the Illinois treasurer to commit up to 5% of their kind of common cash balances to venture capital firms in Illinois to try to drive new startups. They've committed $647 million from that fund, over the past decade or more through 2023. Colorado, we talk about an interesting tax increment financing model where they basically take 50% of withholding attributable to wages in some key sectors of the defined sectors of the economy defined in state law, and they scrape that and put it into a special fund to promote that provides grant funding to promote commercialization in those key sectors of the economy. We also point to a statutorily mandated payback in Michigan. Remember when the Detroit had its bankruptcy, Michigan and private philanthropy and donors helped Detroit arise out of that bankruptcy. The state's contribution to that came from a withdrawal from the budget, our rainy day fund, our budget stabilization fund. And when we did that in 2014, we also passed in state law, we need to pay ourselves back. And this law provides a $17.5 million annual contribution to the budget stabilization fund to replenish it. At least that was the idea at the time, is to replenish the fund. And that annual deposit goes through fiscal year 2035. But separately from that, aside from that $17.5 million deposit, annual deposit, we've already grown that budget stabilization fund by $1.7 billion. So we point to the redirection of that $17.5 billion, which is now largely symbolic. We've paid ourselves back for 4+ times over as a potential avenue for generating ongoing support. Our 21st Century Jobs Fund, administered by the MEDC, has maintained a balance of between $250 and $300 million over the last 10 years. That's kind of a one-time revenue source that's sitting in that fund that would be available if you wanted to make a one-time investment in I&E programming. Tribal gaming revenue is another thing we talk about in the report. The Michigan Strategic Fund, when online gaming and online sports betting came online, for the tribal casinos that engage in that, 10% of the tax revenue is deposited to the Michigan Strategic Fund. That has bumped up that tribal gaming revenue by $17 to $18 million per year in the last couple of years as a result. And that's more revenue that could be programmed to I&E programs. And we know right now there's ongoing debate in the legislature about the corporate income tax earmarks that were part of the tax reforms in 2023 that changed how we tax retirement income and raised the earned income tax credit. Another thing that happened in that legislation is we redirected from the general fund to some special funds, the SOAR fund, our business attraction fund, a special placemaking fund, $550 million of corporate income tax revenue out of the general fund to those funds for three fiscal years, 2023, 2024, and 2025. In 2026, the budget that's going to be unveiled next February by the governor, that all comes back to the general fund under current law. But there's legislation right now considering should we extend those earmarks, and for how long, and how should we use that money? House Democrats, for instance, have emphasized transformational public transit type spending as part of that. But there's ongoing debate on how that money should be used. I&E programs could certainly be part of any extension of that earmark as well. And then some of you may know right now we have a new public investment in Michigan for I&E programming, the Michigan Innovation Fund. The budget that was just passed in the summer, I think it was June, if I'm remembering right, has a $60 million one-time appropriation. It's not ongoing, but it's a $60 million one-time appropriation for a new Michigan Innovation Fund. And that the revenue that will fund that appropriation actually comes from our old Venture Michigan Fund, which was the state's last initiative in terms of trying to provide a significant publicly funded venture capital dollars in the state. While there was some struggles early with that fund, some significant earnings under Venture Michigan are now the source of funding for this new Michigan Innovation Fund. And legislation is being considered right now in the legislature that would set parameters on how those dollars are used. Activity is still pending on the floor, but for at least fiscal year 24, and very likely, since there will still be revenue kind of coming into this Michigan Innovation Fund for the next several years, likely, there will be an opportunity to provide some additional funding, at least in the kind of limited term, for nonprofit venture funds, nonprofit business support type agencies to help with I&E programming in Michigan. Still, over the longer term, that question of how can we generate some more ongoing permanent funding for those programs still exists, however, and some of the options that we just outlined would be on the table for those types of discussions if policymakers want to try to make those efforts. So again, that is the 10-minute long but 10-minute elevator speech of the report. The key takeaways, what are the 3 or 4 things that that everyone should learn from the report? One, economists, again, as we started, economists agree economic innovation is the key to economic growth. It's the key to raising incomes. It's the key to raising living standards in the long run. Without economic innovation, those things stagnate in accord, with long-term economic growth theory right now. And so economic innovation is critical. Research shows that public policy can help. And we outline that research in the report. Again, as we showed, Michigan invests less than many of its neighbors in I&E programs that aim to help that entrepreneurial ecosystem. And the report shows we have options. If we want to raise additional dollars and move additional dollars into I&E programming, there are options we can use to make that happen. So with that, I'm gonna wrap up and happy to take questions.
Thanks, Bob. So we've been told by people close in this field, people who work in this field regularly, that this is the first of its kind, this sort of research in Michigan, bringing light to this. I'm happy that we were able to fill that void. If anybody has any questions, I think you could raise your hand and we can call on you. In the meantime, Bob, you said that, sort of offline, that this whole subject was something very new to you. Was there anything that surprised you as you were going through, or anything that jumped out at you, like, wow, the wow factor?
I think I think the early part of the report that talks about the economic, kind of rationale for public investment in this is, I was not aware of it. I didn't get the connection between, what economists would suggest about R&D and innovation, and the potential for public policy to drive it. So I learned a lot in that avenue. That there is an economic rationale for this. It's not, there's not always an economic rationale for business attraction programs. We do it because we want a battery plant to locate here. There's not a market failure. It's just because we got to compete with other states for that. I&E programs do have, I think, a rationale. The other thing is that other states, and we had that slide in that example, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, do have long-standing partnerships with entities that help drive their system. In Michigan, we haven't really had that. We work with our small business development centers around the state. They have a tech team that helps that's specifically focused on high tech, startups, and trying to provide that support. But we've had different entities provide those services in the past, and we don't fund them. We don't have the robust funding that those other states do. The other thing that some of those states have had is when they invest money, and given that they've had programs that have extended for some time, they're able to get earnings and returns from their prior activities that they can then plow back into additional I&E supports. Ohio has had $1.2 billion in bonding that they can tap to provide their funding. They haven't tapped it all yet. They haven't used all that bonding. They still, I think, had 200 million plus of bonding available if they want to continue to issue bonds. They've been able to they've been able to generate some self-sustaining revenue that has helped them, not have to bond for that full $1.2 billion. I thought that was interesting.
Andrew, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering, what's the difference between the I&E and research and development and all of the other economic development that is going on in the report versus what's being done, especially through things like SOAR or different economic development that has been going on in Michigan. Can you kind of speak to the difference of what these different the programs are?
Sure. So the I&E programs that we talked about, I'll just move back to the. And that's a very simple but a quick description of kind of what these programs are. So innovation and entrepreneurship programs kind of are focused on trying to encourage the formation of new business ventures that bring new technology, new business processes, new innovation to the economy with that special focus. With the idea of, one, we know without public policy intervention, we may get less R&D, we may get less of that technological innovation coming into the economy, per the economic research that we talked about. So it has that focus. In Michigan, our programs, we spend about $15 million on these programs annually in the MEDC budget. Other states were higher, but that's a very small percentage of the overall MEDC budget. They have the business attraction stuff. How do we get that's I&E. The other stuff we do, business attraction, is how can we get existing firms, a big, Amazon wants a new headquarters. How do we get it in Michigan? How do we bring that here? And then there's, other economic development programs, getting job training, the appropriate job training to businesses. How can we facilitate that through public policy? How can we create places that people want to live to help bring in business and population. So there's a whole lot going on in the economic development world. This is, I would say, a small subset of it, but one that has, I think, an evidence base that public policy in the I&E sphere can help generate the goal of having more startups, bringing in more innovative new products and technologies, which make workers more productive, which help boost worker wages and incomes, and which help foster greater standards of living over time. So hopefully that helped. But the I&E programming is a pretty small subset of the broader programs that the Strategic Fund and the MEDC administer.
So just a quick follow-up. So this is more centered toward the individual and small business style entrepreneur and innovation rather than the well, I guess the university could go into that as it states, but this is more the small startup then, as opposed to the larger corporation attraction, I guess. Then
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, it's how do we create a system in Michigan that helps to induce more startups coming out of, could be university research, could be somebody's individual idea. I've got, we're bringing some, we're going to have a spin-off and create some new technology. How can public policy help that to happen more frequently so that we get the positive benefits of that, that help drive, as economists agree, help kind of drive long-term growth and living standards.
Okay, thank you.
Rob from WWJ asked, can you talk again about where Michigan should be with funding? And he may have missed it, but is there information about what types of jobs or future jobs this innovation could lead to? And are there certain areas where there's more innovation in entrepreneurship in Michigan, maybe EV technology or health sciences? Thank you.
So there's not a clear answer as to how much should we be funding, you know, and I don't think we're able in this report to say we should be, you know, we should be where Ohio's at or Indiana's at, but you know, what I think the value of this report is that it provides a benchmark for where we stand relative to other states in terms of providing programming that has some evidence base to it, in you know, achieving a policy goal of creating new economic innovation. My gut would tell me, with the evidence base, that if Michigan devoted more resources to innovation and I&E programs, that we would get greater bang from the buck, you know, from that additional public investment. The second part of the question, Eric, was kind of what areas to focus on.
Is there any information about what types of jobs or future jobs this innovation could lead to?
Our report doesn't dive into, you know, the specific areas, but I think the most important, it could be anywhere, right? I mean, biotech and you know, life sciences and biotech, you know, high tech industries. I think the important thing is that in general, these businesses and sectors that that are kind of more reliant on R&D and innovation also tend to be the sectors that you know, pay higher wages and salaries, because there's a lot of you know, the productivity inducing technology that comes into those sectors. So I don't have I would say there's a great variability of different sectors that this could support, but in general, they're sectors that are kind of high. It could be advanced manufacturing too. It's not outside of manufacturing, that are highly reliant on R&D and you know, and are trying to innovate in order to, you know, compete in the global marketplace. And it could be many things in that.
Bob, I was going to add to your response. Last year, the Citizens Research Council published a series of reports that documented the lack of population growth, lack of income growth, and really what we see, this report you could think of as a follow-up to that. Too many times people get bright ideas and do the research, and then we've heard anecdotally they have to go to another state to help commercialize it, states like Ohio or Indiana. So this sort of investment that we're talking about is keeping these bright ideas, keeping these startup businesses in Michigan, and eventually they go from a 3-people shop trying to catch hold to several hundred people employed in the job. And that's what we need in Michigan, right? We need to attract bright minds from other states, have high income jobs, as you say, Bob. And really, this is about the future of our economy, trying to find that next iPhone, next automobile, next whatever, have it produced in Michigan and have high incomes resulting from those jobs. Andrew?
Eric, just before we hit Andrew, just the tail end, and I'm kind of interested in this too, the tail end of Rob's question at WWJ was, despite Michigan lagging, are there any areas where Michigan actually like he mentioned maybe EV technology or health sciences where Michigan does do well in I&E?
There may well be. We didn't dig into sectoral differences in Michigan, so I'm afraid I probably really can't. I really can't, add any value to that question.
Andrew, let's go back to you.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask what Maureen asked as well, but on top of that, I thought of another question. Is there an inverse? Did you see an inverse in your study of states that are spending less on I&E spending more on economic development? Like, is Ohio spending less on economic development than they are on I&E, whereas Illinois is spending more on economic development than I&E? Did you see kind of an inverse?
We just in these case studies, we just focused on trying to define the spending within their innovation and entrepreneurship programming. We didn't go into the bigger, like what percentage of their overall economic development budget is that. So I couldn't tell you. My gut tells me that Michigan and Ohio and Indiana, spend and all the states spend, a significant amount on economic development. So, Ohio spends a lot. They have that bonding fund, those bonding funds. So they're able to dedicate and my guess is they probably is a little greater percentage than Michigan in terms of its overall budget. But I don't think any states spend, almost all states. I'm not aware of any state that's spends half of its economic development budget on I&E programming. It's generally a smaller subset of the budget. And I didn't, we didn't look at that in those inverse relationships, so I can't say for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, I think one thing I would add for the journalists is the William Davidson Foundation isn't the only foundation we've heard from that is interested in this kind of research and to put before policymakers and ask these questions. There are other foundations, and I'm sure other interested parties that will use this as a building block to push these ideas forward.
Maureen, who are some of the other organizations that have reached out to the Citizens Research Council?
I don't know. I don't know if any have reached out. Eric, do you?
Well, we've had conversations, right? Part of it was the research, Bob and I sitting down with smart people and asking them to get our arms around this. But also as we've started to disseminate this, interacting with them. So the first one that comes to mind is the Song Foundation. Doug Song over in Ann Arbor has really dedicated his post-startup life to helping others understand how to navigate this, helping Michigan policymakers understand what's not happening in Michigan relative to what other states are doing. The Low Foundation is all about helping young entrepreneurs. A number of the other foundations that we talk about regularly, the McGregor Fund, Hudson Weber, Kellogg, they're all very interested in what's happening with this. So yeah, it's a pretty big basket when you start digging into. Well, let's make this the last call. Well, as I said, we're more than willing to stick around as long as we need to, but I want to take up the time and certainly give back a few minutes. And I put Bob's contact information. You can reach him by email, rschneider@crcmich.org, or his phone number 517-485-9444. Happy to follow up afterwards if you think of any questions. See no more. Let me just thank you then for all attending. As I said at the get-go, this is our first real try at this. So if you have any advice how we can do it better, we'd love to hear that. Thank you all for coming. We'll end right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Go ahead and shut it down.